And thank you all for coming, and thank you, Miguel and Lynn, for coming, and thanks to Cal State LA and to the Center for Contemporary Poetry and Poetics and Jay Barrios, who are sponsoring this event. Thank you for coming. Before we start the Q&A, I just want to give you a little background on both Miguel and Lynn. So I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible. I'm going to start with Lynn. Lynn is a Cuban award-winning actress, producer, and writer. She holds a degree in pedagogy from the University of Matanzas. She graduated from the Drama School for Professional Actors in 2006. After 5 years of performing on stages in Cuba, Colombia, and Germany, she made her film debut in a critically acclaimed performance at Larga Distancia, 2010. Besides her leading role in Miguel Coyula's feature Corazón Azul, she has also participated in La Pared, 2006, Próceres, 2011, Nadie, 2017, and Eres tu papá, 2018. Among other awards, she won the Best Female Performance Award at the Cayenne Festival in New York for her role in the Venezuelan film El Niño, 2015. Her novel Terminal got a special mention in the 2018 edition of the Frank Kafka Gaveta Awards. This is in the Czech Republic. Lynn founded the independent international film festival InStar at the Anna Arendt Institute of Artivism. In 2021, she became a documentary grantee of the Doc Society and Perspective Fund. With that support, she helped develop this documentary, Crónicas del Absurdo. Her publication, Crónica Azul, 10 años de rodaje, won the Franz Kafka Ensayo Testimonio Award in 2022. And as you've seen, since 2018, Lynn is not allowed to perform as an actress in any public institution in Cuba. And Miguel Coyula is a filmmaker who has been working outside both commercial and art house mainstream. He gathered several awards in Cuba with experimental short films such as Bailar sobre agujas, this is from 1999, Nice Going, also 1999, Clase Zeta Tropical 2000, among others. In 2001, he was given a scholarship to the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute in New York, where he made his first feature, Red Cockroaches, for less than $2,000 over a 2-year period, which has won 20 awards at international film festivals and was hailed by Variety as, and I'm quoting, a triumph of technology in the hands of a visionary with know-how. In 2010, the Sundance Film Festival premiered his film Memorias del Desarrollo. The film gathered 20 awards and was chosen as the best Cuban film of the year by the International Film Guide. His next project was the documentary Nadie, 2017, centered around dissident Cuban poet Rafael Alcides and his relationship with the Cuban Revolution. Corazón Azul, 2021, was filmed underground over a decade until its premiere at the Moscow International Film Festival in 2022 before winning the HFPA award at the Guadalajara Film Festival. Also a novelist, Miguel Coyula has published Mar Rojo, Mar Azul, 2013, La Isla Vertical, 2022, and Matar el Realismo, 2024. His work is also banned in Cuba. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A, but allow me just to ask a couple of questions, and then I will have you ask whatever questions you want. I only have 3 questions. The first one, the tagline that says, had Kafka been Cuba, he would have been a non-fiction writer, from Virgilio Piñera. Why did you pick that tagline? And it's clear how it relates to the movie, but why did you pick it?
Well, Virgilio Piñera was a writer who was at that meeting, which appears at the beginning of the film, which is the meeting of Fidel Castro with the intellectuals in 1961. And he was the only one who said, after he said those famous words, within the revolution, everything, and outside of the revolution, nothing. he's quoted by saying to Fidel directly, "I'm afraid." And he lived in fear until 1979, right? That's when he passed away. He wrote a lot, but he was terrified most of the time. So the particularity of Cuban authoritarianism is that many times people don't really say things directly, like these inspectors, for example. They don't want to say that they are sent by the government. There's always this dual ambiguity based on a double moral, because people sometimes at home say things they don't dare to say in public or at their workplaces. And so that makes it very unusual in that sense, because they are expected a result from their superiors, but because they don't have the tools to negotiate and provide a reasonable answer, therefore the absurd of many of these situations. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you want to say something, Lynn?
Virgilio Piñera was what he wrote since the beginning was the absurdity of this kind of system, and his books describes this environment that he felt, as Miguel was explaining before, and after the Fidel speech. It was directly for the intellectuals and artists, because he was trying to terrify them at that time. And
Yeah, and from a more technical perspective, sometimes you get inspiration from restrictions when you want to create a movie like this, and I love, and I think you succeeded in superseding the restriction of just working with sound. And I would like to see if you can speak a little bit to that, to how did you go about solving this restriction?
Well, for me, it was a challenge. Every new film is a challenge, and in this case, I wanted to see if I was able to hold the interest of an audience with a movie that is apparently intrinsically anti-cinematic, if we understand film as moving images. So I had these audio recordings that many times were not recorded in the best conditions. Sometimes the phone was hidden in a bag or in a pocket, or like our friend, photographer Javier Caso, he hid it under his shirt when he went to this interrogation. So I could clean up the sound, but it would never be perfect. And so I decided not to clean the sound and use this rustling and this interferences as part of the tension that grows in many of the scenes, like when we are walking to the gallery. And so the visuals had to be a perfect marriage for that. So I decided to do very simple animations at 15 frames per second. I didn't want any very fluid animation like in my other narrative films where special effects are very polished. I wanted them to be stop motion. So all these hands that bring in the little pictures are animated all at 15 frames per second. I just felt it was appropriate for the sound quality that we had. And I wanted to have this black background so that you could focus on the dialogue, because after all, it's a film about language, and these interactions and how they come together, where sometimes you have to complete the actions that you're not seeing. But you can imagine it. So I decided to highlight certain words, enhance the irony in some areas as much as I could with this limited means. But I didn't want to use interviews or any other resource, but just to construct the movie from the archives. Even the pictures of Lynn are from the time periods that each episode took place. And yeah, that was pretty much the strategy. Yeah.
And also the obstacles.
Oh, and the aesthetic. No, there's something interesting. Also because many of these agents, I couldn't find pictures for them online. So I decided to use paintings by Antonia Iris, who was a visual artist who was censored in the 1960s. And she always drew these monstrous abstractions, which were, seemed to me fitting to represent these faceless agents many times. Yeah. And you were saying?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's more for you.
So I just asked you a literary question, a technical question, I have a political question. Because, the revolution was in 1959, and even today in 2025, the glamour of the revolution, it's still very much alive, maybe outside of Cuba. And even when I teach about Cuba, I hear students saying, no, the revolution was a success. There is a resistance against capitalism. We ended illiteracy and stuff like that. So I wanted to see from Cuban artists living in Cuba what the response to that is.
Well, what can I say? I believe in social justice also. I wish it would have worked. But my childhood, I mean, we cannot complain. We were both born in 1977, and in the 80s, our childhood, we didn't have any luxuries, but we had all the basic needs covered. But of course, the economy was artificially supported by the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union fell, that's when the crisis called special period started. And that's when all the great things of the revolution, the healthcare, the education started to get so corrupt. Like, for example, right now, elementary teachers, they purposely leave part of their lessons outside of the day of classes so that the parents will rehire them in the afternoon to teach the kids the rest of the class. And if they don't do that, they don't get a good grade. Healthcare also, people have to give presents to the doctors, bribe them. If there's a limited amount of medicines, someone who doesn't have a relative in Miami to send them money, they just don't get the medicine. So it's pretty terrible, yeah. But it's a state capitalism, a low-budget state capitalism where we are living now.
No, I think there are too many Cuban revolutions. Mm-hmm. It's not just for Cubans, because Fidel was very clever and he knew how to deal with the Soviet Union and also with the Democrats here in the United States and also with Latin America. And it's true that the Cuban Revolution is considered one of the most radical revolutions all over the world. And this is a fact. Too many things changed at that time, and you can see how we work together making these films. It's a romantic idea, and this was one the special things that the intellectuals, artists, they believed in the Cuban Revolution because of Fidel Castro creates the ICAI, the Cuban film industry, the film festival, and all these ideas to do cinema as an alternative. They deny the Hollywood aesthetic, and yeah, this was true. This was not false, and still. Now it's completely different, and the population is not so. They have no faith anymore in the Cuban government because after the pandemic, everything collapsed: the health care, the education, everything. But still, for the rest of the world, there are too many people that they prefer to believe that Cuba, since the Cuban government, they keep this speech, the left-wing speech. Of course, we are in a world in crisis, and yeah.
Incredible, genius movie. I expect nothing less. But I kept thinking of Santiago Alvarez watching this, and I wonder if you thought about him, and I wonder what he would make of this film, because he was an ideologue, but he's very sly, and I think.
Yeah. I always loved the 1960s movies and the work he did with photo animation. I always loved. And there were agitprop movies, which at the same time came from Eisenstein, many of the aesthetic that he had. So I was always interested in subverting the aesthetic of agitprop against. I had a teacher at film school that said, if you're making a political movie, make sure you upset all the members involved in a conflict, otherwise you end up making propaganda for one of them. So I've always gotten in trouble because of this. Well, like you saw in Madrid with the presentation of the novel, where the presenter who read the novel 2 days before the presentation said, I'm a communist and I love Fidel Castro, and they were gonna eat me alive in Miami. And but that happens. I mean, it's necessary for me to find the contradictions in any subject, in any character, as much as I can. To me, that's the essence of drama. It's having good guys or bad guys just doesn't do it for me. Heroic narratives doesn't.
say,
Yeah.
so I come from political satire, and our position was you could never satirize the other unless you satirized yourself, because you would be making propaganda. So it's basically the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Do you have a mic? You have a mic? You have a mic?
I think you can hear me without it.
No, but they are recording.
Oh, they're recording. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
That's a good one.
So when I'm watching your movie, this brilliant movie, I'm thinking, I forget what year it was when I went to the Upper West Side and recorded the phone conversation. And I asked you how you got away with doing this. And you said, I'm so under the radar. I'm invisible. Nobody bothers me.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, it happened that in 2019, up to that year, independent filmmaking was in a legal limbo, but ICAIC, the film industry, decided to create a law called, a decree called the 373 decree, which basically legalized independent filmmaking. But on chapter 6, there's a clause that says that the contents have to be within the liberties allowed by the Cuban Revolution. And it had a lot of great things. You could do co-productions, you could do a lot, but it had that problem. And I decided I didn't sign for that. I mean, like 95% of my colleagues went and rushed and signed and got their independent filmmaking ID from the Cuban industry, who has such a big list of censored films. So me and another filmmaker, Jorge Molina, we didn't sign for that, but most people did. And
So when you didn't sign for it, that made you,
a criminal, basically.
so it was
That's
like,
well, that's what the agent says. If they don't belong to an institution, it's a crime.
right.
And they're
Oh,
nothing. They're not an artist.
Yeah, exactly. You are not. Well, it's funny because I released an audio when Lynn gets censored at the acting agency, and because I put it on YouTube, they called her back and they said she was reinstated, but it was a lie. Nobody ever called her again. But it's funny because the bureaucrat tells her, you're an actress once again, just because you're a part of the institution again. Yeah.
Hola, un gusto. Ay, no, está muy fuerte. No sé si lo puedo decir en español. ¿Está bien? ¿Sí? Okay. Nada más quería hacer un comentario de que siempre hemos escuchado, yo he escuchado de la censura en Cuba, pero creo que da un sentimiento un poco más fuerte y me dio hasta escalofríos el poderlo sentir y escucharlo. Y de verdad que me he quedado sin palabras porque es algo que está pasando todavía, ¿verdad? Y los admiro muchísimo a ustedes por tener esta fuerza y ese poder, porque me imagino que en algún momento ustedes hasta, como se dice, estuvieron con miedo, ¿no? O están con miedo. Pero ¿cómo ustedes siguen con esta, perdón, es como, perdón, me he quedado, ¿cómo siguen haciendo estos documentales y teniendo siempre ese poder? Pero sé que han pasado por mucho, ¿no? Entonces, y que sientan miedo por su propia vida. Pero, ¿qué es lo que todavía los llena de esa fuerza interna?
Bueno, es difícil. No sé si lo traduzco la pregunta. No. Sí, es una buena pregunta. Se hace difícil cada vez porque es un desgaste tremendo, pero yo pienso que lo importante es tomar distancia de uno mismo. Haciendo esta película, bueno, Lynn y yo siempre decimos que es una película que no hubiéramos querido tener que hacer, pero se nos vino encima. Entonces no hubo otra solución. Era una responsabilidad tener todos esos archivos y no sacarlos a la luz, porque ayudaba de alguna manera a entender las dinámicas de Cuba, que son particulares en ese sentido. Y para mí lo importante es, o sea, para mí el cine es lo que yo amo. O sea, la única vez que un agente de la seguridad del Estado trató de hablar conmigo, yo le dije, no tengo nada que hablar con usted, yo no sé quién es usted, y lo he dicho en varias entrevistas, que para mí yo estoy dispuesto a lo peor, a la cárcel o a la muerte si es por una película. No, hay muy pocas cosas en la vida que uno puede controlar, Y yo he encontrado que hacer esto, aunque tarde años para terminar una película, es lo único que me da satisfacción, poder tener el control dentro de una zona donde hay tan poco control de la vida propia para los ciudadanos, ¿no? Al menos para mí esa es mi razón de ser. Pero mi abuela siempre me decía, espera lo peor y serás gratamente sorprendido. Y entonces cuando ya lo ves el mundo de esa forma, pues a veces los propios obstáculos te hacen buscar soluciones creativas que quizás de otra forma jamás te cruzarían por la mente, ¿no?
Sí, no, muchas gracias. ¿Quieres?
Oh, that obstacles sometimes help you come up with creative ideas that perhaps otherwise will never cross your mind.
And his grandma would say, expect the worst and you will be gladly surprised.
Sí, yo pienso también que en ese momento habíamos muchas personas que estábamos creando en esas condiciones, sobre todo artistas visuales, y había también periodistas que estaban, que habían creado sus propias revistas, sus propios diarios, y entonces no estábamos del todo solos. Ahora es peor porque, en una forma, y en otra no. O sea, es peor porque como la situación económica se puso más difícil y ha habido mucha migración en este tiempo, se ha ido, casi todas las personas que interactúan con nosotros en la película ya son fantasmas para nosotros, o sea, no están en Cuba. Y eso hace que uno se sienta como una soledad, es como una especie de desarraigo dentro de tu propio país.
Sí.
Sí, y entonces, o sea, en Cuba nosotros usamos un término para la literatura también, y para la diáspora, que es incilio, como somos inciliados en ese sentido, porque no existimos en Cuba, es como que estamos viviendo en un limbo.
Pero tampoco estamos exiliados.
Tampoco estamos exiliados, entonces no encajamos ni en el exilio ni dentro de Cuba. Y hemos tenido que, o sea, para mí fue más difícil porque yo trabajaba en la industria cubana y en el teatro estatal. Y luego tuve que aprender a vivir en los márgenes. Y entonces, nada, pero de alguna manera te compensa que experimentas la libertad para crear. Y eso es lo que te hace estar más tranquilo, porque sabes que puedes controlar lo que estás haciendo. De alguna manera ganamos libertad y en otra perdimos, no sé, comunidad, puede ser sociedad.
Sí, es muy fuerte y de verdad muchas gracias por el trabajo que siguen haciendo y por la oportunidad de que pudimos ver su documental. Su historia es muy inspiradora y pues espero de que todos también les haya gustado, porque de verdad el no tener las imágenes me hizo hasta sentir muchísimo más, y son dos personas que las admiro muchísimo, y no sé si alguien más quiere hablar.
The chapter about your father's death was so extraordinarily intense, and to be recording it while it was happening, can you discuss that?
This chapter was very difficult to accept myself as a character in the film, because it took me a while to adapt myself to watch what my father and I always said, like Miguel was telling, that I hate myself. I have to confess that I hate myself in a way when I watch the film, because I feel that I had to violate myself to be on these situations, especially with my dad, because when I was at the hospital, in a way, I understood that my father was almost dying because of the negligence, because of my denounces on Facebook. Since the beginning, I realized that everything was a mistake. And the particularity in Cuba, because I know that there are too many testimonies during the COVID time. But the particularity in Cuba was that this was in 2021. Yeah, everybody knew how to deal with COVID. My dad hasn't COVID. He was diabetic and he had a crisis with his diabetic. That's why he got pneumonia. And it supposed that they were controlling the pandemic in his area because he used to live in a military neighborhood, and I was fighting with the doctor and saying, if you have the list of the people that is sick in this area, in this neighborhood, and you can see that my dad has no contact with people with COVID because he was most of the time at home, and they didn't want to accept this reality because they have the order, of course, that to isolate the population with pneumonia or with, ¿cómo se dice? Catarro? Flu, exactly. And yeah, it was because they have no medicine at the hospital, and the doctors knew that. And they were soldiers. And I said, you don't have medicines for him. This is absurd. And then they still decided to isolate my dad. And because he was completely isolated, when I go to the hospital and they say all these scenes that it's in the film, I was trying to know what happened because he couldn't open his eyes, and I was recording a lot of things, but because the cell phone, when it's when you are recording and you are not touching the cell phone, ¿cómo se dice?
Goes off. It turns
Exactly.
off.
And I lost, for example, the dialogue with the doctor. But something happened because I was writing a theater play called Sala R.
Word R.
Word R, the same word that my father was. And because of that, the government did this podcast with the doctor. And this is the only...
the government's answer, because throughout the film they reply all the time. Like, for example, when she was fired from the acting agency, then they called her back. So there's always this unspoken dialogue. When she was working at as a programmer at Instar, then our friend gets called for an interrogation, and she talks at Instar about the film Nadia, and they said they made a film that speaks badly about Fidel Castro. So it's always this constant...
This dialogue between the social media
through other people,
to the individuals, and
Not
because
directly.
Cuba is a small island,
Yeah.
for them it's easy to control the population, and was in a way I couldn't get the audio recording with the doctor, but they did the podcast. And the podcast, the name is the doctor talked about the Sala R word, no?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he does say also, maybe I'm not the perfect doctor, which is very revealing. There's a lot of things like that are very revealing. Like, for example, when the housing inspector is talking to Lynn and she says, we're all Cubans. And for a moment he says, it's either you or me. And that's very revealing. Perhaps the first time you see it, but it's like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be fired, or I'm going to be...
No,
And that follow-up with the doctor was such a moment of black comedy that was so intense.
Yeah, they even added in the podcast the music by Silvio Rodriguez.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Somebody wants to ask.
Hello. Oh, that's loud. Why is it that they say that, like you or me, or like when the brother was talking to the police with the phone on his chest, and he said, "Oh, brother," and they're like, "You're not my brother. Don't call me brother. I'm the officer." Why is it like them against them? Why can't they just be one? You know, like is it like the fear, like they're gonna get fired, or?
Oh, that's a part of the strategy. there's two agents, and they were playing the good cop, bad cop. Like the
Yeah.
first one was the softer one, and then the other one walks in more menacing. But it's like what you really see there is that there's no ideology whatsoever. Because at some moment he says, if you don't like it, then grab a rifle and go to the Sierra Mountains, which is what Fidel Castro did in the 1950s. So, and he, at some moment, he says, maybe one day they will authorize an institution for independent artists. These guys have no belief in, have no principles. They're just playing a role there, and yes, they're afraid to get fired. There's only one employer. It's an island. It's difficult to escape. If you escape, well, you can go on a raft. You cannot do that anymore. But because it's illegal, you cannot arrive to the U.S. They won't give you any papers anyway. But yes, it's always about that. It's a small world where a lot of people know each other, and they're trying to keep the composure and play their roles.
I just want to say I thought your movie was awesome. Like, it made me feel really angry inside. I was like, this is wild. Like, what the hell? Like, I don't know. I just want to say that was really good. I really appreciate you guys' work. And yeah, those paintings too. I thought those were really like touching almost. Like, I thought that was really like intense. And I don't know, I just wanted to say like that was, I appreciate that you guys speak out even with the government, like on your breathing down your neck. I think that's very like heroic, and that's very inspiring.
Thanks. Oh, there's people that are actually worse off than us. There are people in jail now. There are some artists that are in jail, and where they really go really strongly after you if you're a journalist or a performance artist, because if you use the public space, which is why we had the police raid, because we posted on Facebook at the beginning that we were going to have that screening. So we keep doing screenings at home, but it's only by word of mouth. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. we have a group of 15, 10 people coming to see our movies. But we find strategies, because otherwise, if we become full political activists, then we will be in jail right now. And I think that marks the difference. If the government sees you don't have political ambitions, or also the fact that the movies have won awards have protected us in a way. But I don't really know what the reason is. There's always a danger that they might not let us leave the country again, or they might not let us go back, which has happened to people we know. So at any moment it could happen. But the thing is just not to care about it, just like my grandma said, hope for the worst. Yeah.
I hope you guys keep doing what you're doing and spreading your word, because yeah, honestly, that's awesome.
Thanks.
I'll make a comment.
Yeah.
Un comentario, sí. Creo que fue muy interesante escuchar todo esto, los audios, la respiración, cómo ustedes se escucha el movimiento de cubrir las cámaras, que eso añade a la tensión de lo que se están viviendo. Creo que fue una excelente, fue la primera vez que miro un film de esta de este calibre, ¿no? De esta magnitud, donde estás escuchando y ayuda a la imaginación to continue, like, oh my God, this is what is happening. I was scared for you. I was, what is next? Are they gonna get arrested? ¿O los van a arrestar? Entonces, creo que abre esta magia de la imaginación. Y no tanto imaginación, porque puede pasar, aunque no llega a pasar en ese momento. Me preocupé, dije, ¿los van a arrestar? Vi los últimos capítulos y sí, es admirable el trabajo que hacen como cubanos, ¿verdad? He escuchado recopilas de alguien, de productores, de gente de finanzas, y así cuánto talento tiene la comunidad cubana. Se los admiro. Y esa fuerza que yo digo, ¿de dónde sacan esta fuerza estos cubanos tan lindos? Felicidades. Pero sí, es increíble la tensión que, como lo editaste o como lo editaron, que te hace imaginar y te pone tensa, o sea, que sigue, ¿no? El suspenso es excelente. Es un thriller también. Una intriga, miedo, suspenso. Excelente.
Bueno, fue
Very
muy
nice.
interesante porque
Gracias.
a mí me ha interesado mucho siempre el cine de género, el thriller, la ciencia ficción. Y lo que pasa es que muchas de las situaciones son tan absurdas que tienen ese elemento, ¿no? Que son situaciones tan grotescas que tienen el elemento del thriller. Y entonces yo generalmente he hecho películas de ficción, pero aquí estábamos frente a una realidad que parece de ciencia ficción, o sea, distópica, ¿no? Y por eso también me interesaba, ¿no? Contar la historia.
¿Tenía el miedo? Bueno, me imagino que sí.
El mayor miedo en mi caso es que entraran y se llevaran lo que había editado ya de la película.
Wow.
Ese quizás pero bueno, también tenemos estrategias, hacer copias cada cierto tiempo, dejarla en casa de amigos, porque se lo han hecho amigos nuestros, han entrado y se han llevado la computadora y
Sí, el mayor temor casi siempre es con las personas que te rodean, porque en nuestro caso, a veces lo que hacen es dañar a los amigos,
colateralmente, sí.
a la familia, o sea, que no sea directamente porque es como hacerlo de una forma que tú no puedas probar del todo que ellos están haciéndolo, sino que parezca accidental.
Sí.
Otra pregunta, si me permite. Vale. En la mentalidad de izquierda a derecha, ¿no? Estos agentes que tienen tanto poder, que tienen opresión a la gente, ya lo creen ese coraje, ya es parte de ellos, no tienen un sentido amable a la familia, de compasión, o sea, a veces tanto es el mal que siento que opresión que lo empiezan a creer,
Bueno,
o hay gente que es buena en casa y cuando van a la sociedad es más opresiva.
Cuando estábamos haciendo la película Corazón Azul, trabajamos con un actor que había sido en su juventud de la seguridad del Estado y hablamos de eso, que si eran así, y nos contó que había hecho cosas horribles, por ejemplo, extorsionar a negociantes que estaban vendiendo cosas sin permiso y se quedaba con las cosas que vendía, pero decía que en su casa era muy bueno con su familia, por otro lado. Entonces, sí. Con Corazón Azul también nos pasó que intimidaban a muchos actores y a veces se iban y cuando estábamos grabando y no sabíamos por qué, y después hasta que nuestro amigo fue interrogado pensamos que quizás le había pasado cosas así a mucha gente que no se atrevía a contárnoslo, ¿no? Simplemente desaparecían de nuestras vidas.
El problema es que los sistemas autoritarios, cuando logran solidificarse, como pasó en Cuba, que Fidel tuvo vamos a decir, el amor del pueblo y lo que decíamos al principio, que muchos intelectuales y artistas también simpatizaron con la Revolución Cubana porque fue una etapa buena para ellos, porque podían hacer sus obras, pero podían ver también que las personas cambiaron, o sea, que la vida de las personas cambió, que fue real. Entonces, era muy difícil. Fidel mantuvo muy bien esa idea de que la revolución y su figura eran dos cosas distintas. Entonces, lo que ha llegado al presente es una combinación entre miedo o sea, los mismos agentes temen porque saben que hay un poder por encima de ellos que los puede eliminar. O sea, también en Cuba existe pena de muerte, especialmente para los militares. Vamos a decir, todos los agentes no son militares, pero muchos sí. Y tienen todo esto detrás, ¿no? Como que hay dos bandos, revolucionarios contra revolucionarios, castristas, anticastristas. Entonces, como dentro de la revolución todo, fuera de la revolución nada. O sea, volvemos al mismo discurso del principio. Se mantienen esos dos polos, o sea, está muy polarizado el discurso, entonces es difícil porque te quedas en lo que decía, la posición nuestra es La Habana y es Miami. Entonces son dos discursos que son dos extremos, y entonces cuando tú tratas de ser fiel a ti mismo, por ejemplo, si tengo que decir que simpatizo con los intelectuales que participaron en la revolución, con los del principio, sí, porque ellos realmente estaban pensando en la sociedad, en los cubanos, vamos a decir, en las personas que sí les mejoró la vida. Entonces, claro que uno que creo en la justicia social. Entonces es difícil porque no te encuentras en ninguna parte.
What would it take for things to change there?
Well, I don't know.
For the better, I should say.
I think, sadly, I don't have the magic ball to look into the future, but I think that because people for so long have gotten used to living a double life, they have grown used to lying, to stealing, instead of facing directly the problems. Even if things will change now, I think it will take a couple of generations for the Cubans to recover a sense of ethic and develop principles again. Sadly, not everybody's like this, but a big deal of the society, of the people that remained in Cuba, function like this.
So they're basically resigned to surviving
yes,
under that system?
survival has become such an intrinsic part of their daily lives that they're willing to do anything. There was an episode that, for example, didn't make it into the film, which was someone I knew that he started a relationship with a woman, and they both decided to put his father on an asylum for the elderly, which everybody knows in Cuba that's a passport for death. And they did it so that she could bring her family in and her 2 kids, and the dad was an obstacle, and they just got rid of him. They sent him to die, and we found out 2 months later. But then I thought, this woman, you could say she's just a psychopath, but no, she's just interested in having her 2 kids have a home in Havana because they came from the countryside. Her parents are, and they do whatever it takes for that. They wanted to live in Havana with this person I knew, and the old man was an obstacle, so they got rid of him. And sadly, that's a story that is not isolated. It's just, you see it everywhere.
So in other words, it's endemic now to the Cuban character to just survive on...
Yeah, in a big deal. There are
Overall.
exceptions, of course, but it's something you see more and more. And people don't have hard... We see these things and we say, wow, how can they live with that? But they don't. Apparently they don't. I don't know if they think about it, but many times they don't. They just
Wow.
live in the present so much that they can't.
Wow.
Getting food on your plate has become a big deal in Cuba. Every day, yeah.
When do you think the descent into absolute absurdity, double lives, happened? Because there was a time when there were still people who believed, and I think I might have seen the end of that time, but I'm just curious. There was always incipiently corruption and doubling going on, but it didn't seem to affect everybody. And now the texture I'm seeing is that it affects everybody. When do you think it really, and I know that I'm sure after COVID things became absolutely impossible, but where was the beginning of this descent into the double lives, do you think?
It was always there, I think, but it got really worse during the special period after
Yeah.
the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yeah, and the double life comes in a very easy way. Like, for example, you have to buy food in the black market, and if there is a kid at home who hears their parents saying horrible things about Fidel Castro when he appears on TV, but then he sees them applauding him when they are at their workplace, that kid grows up without any sense of morals or ethics, and yeah, and it's been several generations already. Like
Of course, we're having it happen in one quick Trumpian bite. It's descended, it's in hyper time in this country.
yeah.
Okay, last question.
Nada más tenía curiosidad qué pasó con su amigo el fotógrafo, porque creo que cuando lo entrevistaron esa fue una de las partes que fue más explícita, de que los tenían monitoreados, y me sorprendió mucho, pero tengo curiosidad qué pasó con él.
Él regresó una vez más a Cuba y no ha regresado más desde entonces, pero es hermano de Ana de Armas, la actriz de Hollywood. cubana que trabaja en Hollywood. No sé si eso quizás hubiera sido un escándalo, se le hubiera pasado algo, ¿no?
Sí.
No sé.
Pero él no
Vive
quiso
en
volver.
Nueva York ahora.
El interrogatorio funcionó muy bien para ya su familia, su mamá que quedaba en Cuba se fue y ya no han vuelto.
Sí, pero él se atrevió a hacer lo que nadie se había atrevido en
Sí.
Cuba, grabar un interrogatorio de la seguridad del Estado, porque a él le pidieron que entregara su teléfono y él entregó el suyo, pero tenía el otro grabando acá. Y es muy interesante porque, eso es la segunda vez cuando uno se da cuenta, pero cuando él entra se escucha el latido de su corazón porque tiene el teléfono cerca del pecho. Y a medida que avanza el interrogatorio se empieza a calmar porque ya sabe que no le van a quitar el teléfono y se empieza a burlar de los agentes también.
¿Y qué piensan ustedes que hubiera pasado si se lo hubiera
Imagínate,
encontrado?
ahí sí podía haberlo encarcelado. Porque...
No, pero
Sí.
después
Sí.
desnudaban a los periodistas cuando entraban a los interrogatorios, porque los
Después de
periodistas siempre los someten a ese tipo de interrogatorios. Y entonces, a partir de esa grabación, les obligaban a desnudarse.
Wow. Es muy fuerte.
Sí.
Sí, muchas gracias.
De nada. You understand that after the interrogatory, the journalist in Cuba, the independent journalists,
So
they
then-
had to
They
be
stripped them
naked
naked.
in the interrogatories because of
Search
this
for microphones
audio
and
recording.
audio
Yes. Mhm.
By the way, that Madrid thing was a complete ambush.
Oh yeah, it was an ambush. But what was really interesting there is that the presenter that the editorial house got only read the novel 2 days before. And it's funny because the editors had told me they loved the book, but when the shit hit the fan, she was saying, "Oh, I was so concentrated on the commas that I didn't realize what was happening." And that's exactly the same reaction that you will get in Cuba if there will be within a cultural institution some censorship. An editor will always try to wash their hands and say, "I didn't realize it was so." It's exactly the same. How they repeat from a reverse ideology, but it's the same behavior, both outside of Cuba where things like this shouldn't happen, but it's just the repeating islands like that
I also
book.
love the Moscow Film Festival. You alluded to,
Yeah.
certain things. It's great.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
And thank
Thanks,
you, Miguel,
Pablo, for the
and Lynn.
invitation. Yeah.
Thank you to Pablo as well. And of course, this is all fiction for the US because we know nothing about censorship.
Well, it was interesting when we showed the film in Miami. A bunch of Cuban Americans walked out with the presentation of the novel with that scene.
Mhm.
It was interesting.
Wow.